Well, it's 4 o'clock.
James will get here, yeah.
He'll be here on his own good time. Well, let's call this meeting to order. I'll start with an invocation. Lord, continue to watch over us. Help us through our everyday lives. Help us to make the right decisions for the good folks of this town. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We don't have anybody signed up from the audience. Matter of fact, I think it's all us today.
It is.
So we'll start off with Darren, the general manager's report.
Got it. I'll go very quickly and have one extra of the 4 bullet points. Number one, emergency response. One of the things that we've, as I stepped in, got here, we had our, thank you. We had our August outage with the storm. And since then, we've been having a couple of meetings where we're looking at the things we did right, the things we did wrong. And we've really got, I think we've gotten going in the right direction. We'll have some extra training, perhaps a tabletop exercise to make sure that we're even better prepared in the future. And I'm hoping that with that preparation, maybe Mother Nature will take it easy on us and recognize that she shouldn't mess with us. But that's knock on wood. Number two, the Build Back Better and the bipartisan infrastructure funding. That is the kind of the hot item in the industry. We've got lots of things happening, but there's also, it's gone from the federal. They're trying to set up the rules to get it to the state. They're handing it to the state. The state's going to have to go through and figure out what they're doing with it. It was very interesting. We went to an MPUA meeting, we being Matt and myself. A gentleman that was a legislator down there said that they've never had so much money in their life. And now they've got, he says, sometimes the bickering gets much worse when it's like that than it is the other way. And they're saying that there's approximately over 900 bills and items that they're going to have to handle at the state level. And so if that's going to happen, timing, the availability, all of those questions are going to get a little more, I anticipate we're going to have to be patient before we even know what the rules are as the money gets allocated throughout the state. So we are keeping close tabs on that. We are very thankful to be a part of the MPUA that has legislative representatives there at the state level. And so when we know exactly where we're headed with it, we'll keep you involved. But we're anxious to make sure that we can take advantage of any of that may come about. Item number three, unaccounted for water. You're going to have a report later on during the operations report from Alex. Again, great team effort has gone forward, and you'll see this month that the numbers come down some. We anticipate that it will improve as everyone's been involved. And that involvement, and I'm sure he'll repeat, has been involved all the way to every division. So our electric guys are helping out, the sewer guys, water, I mean, everybody's got their antennas up, and we're doing the best, and I think we're going to see some great results. The MPUA award, this last month, we actually had the MPUA came down and they gave an award to Lewis Riggs, Representative Riggs, who's been great helping us to get the money for the February storm, Hurricane Uri, not hurricane, the ice storm. And we gave him an award of appreciation for what he's done there and with the fiber. But we also received an award for safety, again, and for our reliability. And this is the RP3. One of the things to know about the RP3 is it's a monstrous amount of work, and we need to again recognize the Hannibal team of Courtney and Matt and everybody else that was involved in making that happen. But this is something that we are very proud of, and so there's that. The last thing I will say that's not on this report is supply chain. There's one of the things that I've always loved about the electric industry is that it's fairly consistent. There's things in there you can rely on. We have some transformers that we're pricing that they're normally around $1,700. They're now $9,900. And the delivery time is, what is it, Matt?
Earliest was next November.
So we're talking 11-month delivery time on those transformers.
Talking about the small pole top ones?
We're talking about small base
Underground.
transformers, base mount. So it's and some of them are still available, some of them aren't. And so what we're seeing is that there's no real consistency or something you can kind of rely on. So something might be out, something might be in. That supply chain is getting kind of fragile.
Are those the types that are used at like the new subdivisions going in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do we have any reserves?
We have some. We have some. And what we usually do is we sell at the replacement cost. And so that will be some sticker shock for some folks. Mm-hmm. So it's all the way across the board. But like I said, those are things that we just have no control of. But that's what we anticipate and see coming. So that is my report, unless you have some questions of me.
Anybody? No. Do you think that any of the federal money that's out there might be able to be pulled into our stormwater situation?
A tentative, yes, possibly. And again, there are definitely monies being put into stormwater, and it all has to do with qualifications, what are the rules, and so I will say yes, but man, we're going to, I can't promise you anything.
That's all in the 900 bills that haven't even been
Exactly.
looked at very closely. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and I think most of that will go through the SRF, State Revolving Fund. We'll have to qualify with them, and then whatever additional requirements the feds will put on that. So that's my anticipation. I think we will be able to go get some, but it's a kind of a wait and see.
Do you have an individual or a team that's running point on keep an eye on what's there and possibly?
Again, it's MPUA is really the point. They've got a couple of people that are in watching, and then we're staying in contact with that. And Matt and I are really doing that communication with them, just learning all that we can.
Nice.
So, Matt, anything you'd add to that?
Just a lot of the local, a lot of the state regulations or how we even apply for this money hasn't been developed yet. And you've got the ARPA money, you've got the bid money.
Build back better, and then you've got the infrastructure fund money.
I mean, there's different caveats for each pool of money. They're not wanting to commingle the monies because the ARPA money doesn't have some of the requirements that most of your federal monies have, such as American Iron and Steel Act and some other stuff that would delay the project further. They're wanting to get that money out there so that the projects can get going and they can see some benefit out of that money being spent quickly. And so they're still trying to develop these applications, the deadlines, what the qualifications, what qualifies for a project and what doesn't. So we're sitting in on a lot of the different industry seminars and stuff to try to understand it as best we can at this point.
We had so for the last month and a half, they've been saying that if you have bid money, the build back, the bipartisan infrastructure dollars coming, that if you actually use the ARPA money as part of the matching, that was something that they wanted, that they were kind of hitting on. They were saying that this is going to be actually benefit you and move you to the up. And so the monies that the city has received would have been what they were looking for to be part of that match. What I've read recently is now they've changed that and said, no, we don't want that you're going to have to come up with. And so these rules are absolutely fluctuating on a 30-day basis, and we just don't know. It really is, until it's in writing, been approved, and then saying, here you go. The other thing that's difficult is we've got some projects, we'd love to do the engineering on it, we'd love to start the studies, but a lot of times if you start something, that disqualifies it for any future funding.
Yeah, crazy.
And so we're,
Not just disqualifies it for future funding, but you may not take a step that
They're not gonna
you
pay
have
you
to
for that.
have
Yeah.
for that funding.
yeah. So we're waiting, we're watching, we're trying to learn just as fast as we can, but a lot of it is in their ballpark waiting to happen.
And a lot of it requires state to allocate the money through the legislature. Until they get back in session and do that, then we don't have any guidelines.
Thank you, Matt. I want to congratulate you all on your awards as well. I know that
Yeah, that's good stuff.
it takes a lot of work to get those done, so.
Yes, very much. Good team, great team. All right, thank you. That's it for my report.
Okay. Matt and Alex.
All right, I'm going to give you a little bit of an operations report, and then Alex will dive deeper into what we've been doing as far as water loss and where we stand with that. Big thing on electrical side is with the Minnow Creek subdivision, their contractor has finished the installation of the conduit for phase 2, and so our crews have been out there pulling wires in, primary and secondary wiring in, and putting the street lights up. That transformer issue that Darren spoke about, it may prevent us from setting some transformers out there that we would have if under normal circumstances until they're needed. So, another thing we've been doing over the past month is, even though we've had warmer weather, we've been preparing for winter. You know, items that would freeze up under normal winter conditions. The crews have been going around and winterizing, whether it be hydrants, meter pits, the crews at the water and wastewater plant, winterizing some of that equipment out there. Water distribution, we repaired a leak out here and the Highway 61 median that required crews to come in at night and work overnight because of the volume of traffic on Highway 61. A 16-inch main there, it has lead joints, and so one of the lead joints had kind of pushed out, and they were able to dig it up and repair it relatively quickly. It wasn't as deep as the repair, just closer to the intersection that was completed about a year and a half ago. So, and then we're just going through our AMI upgrades. We continued with the transponder changeouts during the month of November, with the water crew or the meter crew focusing on the water meters, and then we also utilized some of the linemen to replace the electric meters. And then we're focusing on this month is inside water meters. The CSRs up front have been calling and scheduling appointments for our crew to enter buildings to make sure that we can get the water meters changed out. So once we get those meters or those registers changed out, it helps us a lot with a water loss as well. So it's something we're really pushing to do. Right now we're sitting about 50% changed out. So. And that's all I've got on that side of things. I'll going to turn it over to Alex to talk more about the water loss.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
So I want to give an update. You know, I know we've been speaking about water loss, a couple months now. It's been high. I wanted to give an explanation, kind of what goes into this and what exactly we're looking at, what the factors are when we talk about lost water. So the main thing, I like to refer to it as water accountability instead of loss, because when you see this 45% discrepancy, it's not necessarily that we're losing it. We cannot account for it. You know, once it leaves the plant, we can't account for where it goes. Some of it might be lost, some of it might not be. So with that, there's really 4 factors that go into this water loss or water accountability that we give you. The first one is going to be gallons leaving the plant, what we make that leaves the plant. At this point, and when we're looking at this, we don't necessarily care about if we're losing anything from the raw through the production, or if there's leaks in the basins, that type thing. We're really most concerned about what's leaving the plant as treated water. Number two is going to be your gallons that are consumed by the customers and billed for. The third thing that goes into it is gallons of water which are produced but not necessarily billed, which could be a leak. It could be hydrant flushing. It could be any number of things, fires. It's not necessarily billed, but it is treated water that we're using for that. And then the fourth thing that goes into it is the reporting through our NISC side, how we keep tabs on these things and ultimately generate a number that we come back to you guys with that says, here's kind of where this difference is. So I want to walk through and bear with me. I'll try not to bore you too much, but starting at the top, the water plant, this is kind of where I would say the first month that this really kind of reared its ugly head and that percentage was high, we sat down and said, we want to start at the top at the water plant. First and foremost, let's make sure we are comfortable knowing exactly what is leaving the plant. And so we went through an exercise. We calibrate our meters at least twice a year anyway. I had an MPUA technician come in, verify that all of our differential pressure meters are reading right through SCADA. They're transmitting the numbers back correctly. In order for me to stand here ultimately and say, what's leaving the plant is right. The numbers that we're reporting every month leaving the plant is right. And, and to that tune, you can see in the historic data that the trends year to year are following each other very closely. 19's right here, 20's right with it, and 21, we're consistently producing the same amount of water that we always have and that we would expect. So to that tune, the water plant is not a suspect in this, right? We're confident in what's leaving the plant. It's not really part of the equation. I shouldn't say part of the equation, but it's not something we're concerned about, right? We're not overly inflating the water leaving the plant, which would cause us to be high. So we can kind of forget about that for now. The second one I mentioned was customer meters, and Darren and I have talked extensively. We're not going to let up on getting every drop of water to be accounted for. If meters are slow by 1% or by 3%, that ultimately, it's a small overall number. We're looking for 1 million gallons a day, basically, and this meter number, if they are off, would be more like 1 million gallons a month, to put it into perspective. But that's also not downplaying it. As Darren and I have had multiple conversations, you get several of these 3% differences on top of each other. It can add up to a big overall effect. But ultimately, I think what I want to say about the customer meters is, I don't think right now at this time it's the bulk of our concern. Can I stand here and say that they are 100% completely accurate? No, they probably never are. There's always a little bit of discrepancy, whether it's 0.5% or whatever. But that is, I don't think what's made us go from 20-ish range up to this 40% that we saw the last couple months. So I think to that tune, we are still going to stay on that, and I would like to eventually phase in some sort of a program where we occasionally spot test meters. Go out to Southside and grab a couple and verify that they're accurate. Go to different parts of town and verify these, and especially our larger industrial type meters. We need to make sure those are accurate. But with all of that said, I don't think that's the bulk of our concern for what we're looking at right now. So we move on. The third thing I mentioned was billing and reporting. So, and that's two. It's one and the same, but it's different also. So the billing side, I'm very confident in. We have an extreme amount of checks and balances and Paul could elaborate on that. But we have a lot of eyeballs, a lot of alerts on the system, such as, if Bill were to use twice as many gallons as he would normally use in a month, it would alert us on the billing side and say, hey, there might be something wrong here. This is out of parameter. And so as far as billing goes, it's very accurate and a very sophisticated system. On our reporting side, there's several different reports that we can run through the software that come back and say, here's the amount of total gallons. There's an algorithm involved to tell you how many gallons that you use through these meters that we can use to calculate the accountability. The tricky part with that, so as confident as I am in the billing system, I can't really use that to compare water accountability or water loss because of several factors. We have 6 billing cycles, which are not necessarily exactly a 30-day window. And so ideally, when we're looking at the water plant, I know from the 1st to the 30th of the month exactly what left that water plant up there. But when you look at the billing side of things, those 6 different billing periods don't necessarily correlate exactly to that same period that left the water plant. So it's not really an apples to apples comparison on that. And so what we've resorted to and what we've been utilizing for a couple years probably is it's called a detailed consumption report that we run through NISC software. But basically what that does, it looks at all the meter reads in the system and says, give me an Excel output from the 1st and give me an Excel output of the 30th of what that meter read. And then in the Excel spreadsheet, that generates a number of how much in that 30-day window, the same 30-day window we're looking at for the water plant, what that water usage is. And I guess without getting too windy here, I think ultimately this is where our discrepancy lies. Matthew Jones is absolutely, I can't say enough about the work that he's done with this whole thing, and I wish he was here so I could tell him in person, but he spent something like 15 hours, I think, going through the system and trying to figure out exactly how NISC is generating this report and where these numbers are coming from and all that. And we found a few things, like, one example was if a meter's dead and we're doing a change out on that meter. Let's say it was dead and we changed it out on the 4th of the month. That report that we run would say no reading, no reading, no reading, and it would get that reading on the 4th from when we changed that out and grab it and say, okay, there's your first reading. Let's put that in the spreadsheet as begin read. What we found out is when you first install that meter and it bounces off the transponder, a lot of times that very first one, when it's installed, is some erroneous number. It's just some kind of a random 6-digit number. And I know Matt and I were looking at this in his office, and it's like, this guy's a residential customer. There's no way he used this many gallons. And went back and looked, and sure enough, it was one of these erroneous. We changed the reading or the meter out, and in that report, it gave a weird number. In the billing, it's perfectly fine because it gives you that one erroneous reading, and then the rest of the month it syncs back up, and the billing's all perfect, and Cindy's double checked it, and everything's just spot on. So there's several weird anomalies through this NISC that has a lot to do, I think, in my opinion, with a lot of the change outs we're doing and that sort of thing that just is leading to, I guess, ultimately what I've got underlined here at the end of my report is we're not necessarily confident in the reports that we're getting from NISC that they're fully correct, which is good news because I truly don't think we're losing 1 million gallons a day. I think it's in the numbers and in these reports that we're relying on the computer to give us that are throwing some odd numbers. To go, let's see, so the fourth thing I mentioned that I kind of want to wrap up with and then give you a summary is the non-billed water. And I do think that this is some source of the discrepancy or perceived loss, and that I don't think on our small diameter main leaks we're doing a bad job on estimating. On the larger diameter leaks, I suspect we're drastically underestimating those. I've run a few calculations. There's a formula, not to get too nerdy, called the Greeley formula, but that's what AWWA and a lot of agencies rely on to estimate leaks. And like Matt mentioned with this with the 61 leak, for example, on a 16-inch diameter main, a very, very small, an eighth of an inch crack that's 12 inches long loses a lot of water, way more than what you would think. And so I kind of want the opportunity to follow up on this because I've talked with our water department. I'm going to have them start bringing back some general information on the leaks. One, a picture. Two, if they can give me kind of the size of the area of the leak, and a couple things so I can actually run calculations. And hey, if they're estimating that a leak was 50 gallons a minute and I pencil it out and it comes out to 52, close enough. If they're estimating at 20 or 30 and I'm saying it's closer to 200, okay, after we do a number of these, we can reasonably go back in time and say, yeah, these 5 leaks were probably pretty drastically underestimated. And so I think that's a factor here, but ultimately I do believe the biggest factor is probably in our reporting, and second biggest factor is probably our estimation of leaks. Do we have leaks in the system? Yes. We fix leaks 3 times a week, if not more. I mean, Hannibal is an old system. You're always going to have leaks. I have consolation to know in the short time I've been here, 6 months or so, we've had, I think, three sizable leaks, and the water plant sees them like that. They've got the plant dialed in at 2.8 or 3 gallons a minute, and Ron calls me in the morning and says, "Hey, I'm losing water in the towers. I can't keep water in the clear well. We've got a leak." I mean, he sees it. That production has to increase. So a leak is a demand on the system, just like a customer, right? If you've got a 1,000 gallon a minute leak, that's just like a 1,000 gallon a minute customer. And so in order to feed that leak, you've got to ramp up production of that plant. So I think we do a good job of finding these big leaks. I do not think we have any large major gushers that are just dumping water out into the creek. At the end of the day, I think we've got some reporting things that we need to square away and get with our NISC rep and just see where these numbers are coming from and kind of what we're missing. But we're on the right path. I don't know if you guys have seen the numbers yet, but it's down about 15% just from some things we found in the reporting side for the most part. And I think as we stay on it, like Darren said, department-wide, or Board of Public Works-wide, all departments, I think you're going to see that whittle down to, my goal would certainly be below 20% is where I would like to see it.
Ask a couple of questions come to mind. Non-billable or rogue or illegal taps. Do we suspect any of that out there, and how would we track them?
I'm not going to say there wouldn't be, Bill. Anything's possible. But again, I go back to, I don't want to downplay the significance of that, because any illegal tap or anything like that would be...
something on an industrial side.
It's not good,
big,
right.
But.
Yeah. But I think it's such a small number. And again, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I'll reiterate the discrepancy we've seen that led to that 45% loss, basically, that we saw like last month, is over $1 million a day. And so a residential customer that's got an illegal tap, you're talking about, if you use a lot of water, 10,000 gallons a month. Yeah. So do we need to make every effort to track those down and find them and minimize them and make sure our meters are accurate. Absolutely.
How about reviewing, I don't know how it's done. I've heard it's done, that electronic review station to station, for example. So you're looking for leaks, either with audio or...
Gene, our water distribution guy, when does he have leak detection in here?
Usually July or August.
Yeah,
He comes in and
got a company or a
looks
guy
for
that
leaks.
comes in. Yep, that goes around. I think he does it at night, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And
Really?
listens. Yeah, and has found them historically. Has found some problem areas.
Yeah, some communities have, you pay a consultant to come in and spend 2 weeks looking for leaks, or 2 months, whatever the need is.
That's something we're also looking at with our meter reading software or meter collection software. That we can actually put listening devices out on the valves, out in the system, and they've got it goes back through a website, and they can get you in it pretty close to where a leak is, and then it would be up to us to go out and verify and then make the repair. But
There's a
they've
few
had good results with it.
Yeah.
We're just to the pricing component right now.
Of course. Those leaks that happen under a pavement but close to a storm sewer, you could chase those forever. Obviously. How about when, and this would be minor, fire hydrant flushing, do they meter that, or do they just flush and let us know they're flushing?
They currently don't physically meter it; they estimate it. There's some
So
different
many minutes that it's running.
We
So-
do the flushing.
Okay.
right,
Our guys do it.
and we know pretty close within reason. It's actually in our GIS database of, we know hydrants are a 700 gallon a minute hydrant or whatever, and so if they're flushing it for 10 minutes, you can get it reasonably close. Is it 100%? Probably not, but it's very reasonably close.
And we're asking them to be more accurate. So all of that, so we've gone to the water department, we've gone to the electric department, we've gone to the billing department, we've gone to the IT, we've gone to everybody, and this is an absolute, this is something we've got to get under better control. I mean, this is our core business, is that we sell water and we do it right. And so that number is just an indicator, but every single department is tightening up. So if we can get 1 or 2% from each one, that's when we make that difference. And so that's what we've emphasized with them. I hope we get some kudos for self-reporting, for being transparent and letting everybody know, this is a problem that we are having. But we're also confident we're going to get it under control.
Especially with leaks. I mean,
Right.
chase those down, the big pipes.
Yep.
Definitely.
Really can cause a disaster later on.
Yep.
Okay.
Anybody else? Thank you, Alex.
No problem. Thank you guys.
Matt, I think you're up again.
First project I wanted to update you on is North Street. It appears the core contractor has completed the repair, most of the restoration work. Everything looks good. There's a picture of it there in your board packet. Next big thing we got going on is the tie line project, the Fin Connection project. Since last month, we bid out the control building for the new Oakwood substation, the 161 to 34.5 substation. It'll be up for approval. The tree removal trimming contract for this portion of the project be up for approval, and also testing or design work for the pipeline. It'll also be up for approval. Since we parallel the pipeline in most of this corridor, they're concerned about the underground currents and the corrosion it would potentially cause with the pipeline. So that's something that they're requiring. We do have a poll bid going, or request for proposal due tomorrow, and so we'll know what our structures will cost at that point. Right after the first year, we'll go out for request for proposal for all the materials, from the lines, the insulators, that sort of thing. And then sometime in February, I believe it is, go out for the actual installation cost. Right now we're tracking, we're around the budget. There are a few things that are a little bit higher, such as this, I think it was the control building was a little higher than anticipated, but it's just the market that we're in at this point. So, and then we're still planning on in April, we're closing on our financing. So
Good.
Do you have any insight into the reason that the tree service we use for here didn't bid the,
I think it was availability of personnel. They're having a hard time keeping personnel just here to fulfill their contract that they presently have. It seems to be in that industry. I've talked with my brother-in-law who works for an electric co-op, and their services are having a hard time keeping personnel as well.
So with the three bids that you had out there, you really only had one that was competitive or had competitive bids.
Mm-hmm.
Part
Part of that is just availability to do the project. Like Darren spoke earlier about just our pad mount transformers. You know, the one vendor that the vendor that we normally use, they wouldn't even give us a quote because they're booked up through 2023.
So in looking at the other two bids, the single bidders, the tree and the oakwood, were those within a reasonable range? Is what I'm saying. What I'm wondering.
The tree bid, it all depends on availability of their equipment and whatnot. It was a little bit higher than Jared anticipated, but it was based on the market and the time frame. It was acceptable. The control building, it was more of a availability of people to do it, but it was, what was it, 25% higher than the engineer's estimate, but that's lower than we've seen in other bids and you know, Martin Street or anything else that's kind of came in during this COVID time.
And we're also seeing a lot with the contractors. We're very anxious about when we go out to bid for the construction side of it, because you're now in a contractor's market. They've got more work than they need. They can pick and cherry pick and get the ones that are gonna, and when they come in here, we may have a contractor, they're not hungry, and we're gonna have to pay for them to get here. So that's, with this, again, all this infrastructure money coming, I think we're gonna see the cost of just about anything we do with any kind of contractor going up significantly. And it's just the market we're in. So.
Anybody else? Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Paul, you're turning a barrel.
All right, good afternoon. Finance report for November of 2021. We can jump right in. Saw a jump in unrestricted cash for the month, basically just due to an internal reconciliation. Accounting wise, to actually recognize the payment that we received back in July for the diesel generators. So once we recognized that, we saw a jump there. Significant increases also in long-term assets and liabilities, just based on the entries that were provided last month by the auditors to record our current year loggers activity. We'll talk a little bit more about that later when we get into the audit report. Next page down, the income statement. Utility-wide net income for November was about $1 million higher than what we had budgeted. So a huge jump there. The driver of that was much lower than expected purchase power costs for the month, which were down about 63%. So if you recall from last month, October, we had a huge spike in our purchase power costs, and we've now seen a complete reversal of that, and we're now seeing credits that are offsetting that spike that we saw in October, which we were told at the time was due to extreme congestion on our nodes. Now we're seeing these huge credits that are swinging the other way, and we don't really have much of an explanation for why we're seeing them, though we're not complaining too hard at this point, but we are definitely still investigating exactly what's going on out there with that, just because as we get into our budget season, we're not really exactly sure how to budget for some of these anomalies that we're seeing out in the market right now. But it's certainly been positive for us over this past month, surprisingly. So kind of the unique thing about that is earlier in the report on page 5, you continue to see that if we were to go out at this second and buy a megawatt hour off the market, it would cost us about $44, $45, which is more than double what it would have cost us a year ago. And so if we were to base our assumption and our purchase power costs on that base price alone, you would think that we would need to budget a whole lot more money for purchase power. However, we're actually seeing that our purchase power costs are kind of down a little bit, and that's because of some of these ancillary benefits that we're getting from these credits and things like that that are actually offsetting those higher costs. And so, again, it's very complicated, and like I said, when we go to budget for it, you would want to budget more for the increase that we're seeing in overall energy prices, but that's really not the case. And so, kind of after the holidays, we are expecting another meeting with GDS, our power supply consultant, just to kind of figure out what's going on specifically for Hannibal. And really, we're used to these kinds of spikes, both up and down, but never to this magnitude. And so that's kind of the scary part of it. But we're certainly looking at that more and want to get that figured out before we get this next budget put together. The other flip side of that, and not really a flip side, but also a benefit to us in our lower purchase power costs is Prairie State. We've talked about it here over these last few months, but essentially there's a couple reasons for why we're seeing such high credits from Prairie State. One, the plant is running extremely well right now. They've had very few outages. We're seeing capacity factors 95, 96, 97%, which means that they're operating at an extremely high level, which has been very, very beneficial. And then two, our load here for the city of Hannibal really has been pretty low recently. We haven't had any significant knock on wood weather events or abnormal weather, and so we've had a pretty consistent load, and so we haven't had a need to kind of use all of that power that Prairie State's generating, which allows it to then directly be sold back into the market. And whenever that happens, we directly reap that benefit because it gets paid directly back to us. And so this time of year, we're used to seeing maybe a $40,000, $60,000 range credit from Prairie State on a weekly basis, and those have been coming in at 120, 130, 140. And so that's added to that offset to our purchase power cost. And that's another thing, though, too, we can't really bank on because you never know when they're going to have a pulverizer go out or whatever it may be, and they got to take one of those plants down. And so we're trying to maintain a constant communication with Prairie State on an operational basis just so we're aware of those outages because, as we've seen, with Winter Storm Uri, it can have a big impact on us what happens at Prairie State. So those are the two main factors right now and why our purchase power costs have been so low and really what's led to our recent financials being so good. So just that was a little bit of a long-winded explanation, but overall for the month, the water and sewer funds were right around budget. They both did have lower operating expenses, again, as we've been used to seeing. But comparing this month, 2021 to last year, 2020, utility-wide net income was up about $434,000, which was again due to lower purchase power costs. Something we've looked at on a monthly basis is our overall kilowatt hour sales, and we've been used to seeing a little bit of an uptick this year just because we're comparing more to a COVID environment last year where overall industrial usage was down quite a bit. And so this month alone was about 6.5% more than November of 2020. Year-to-date actual, we're now 5 months into our fiscal year 22. Net income there is about $815,000 more. Sewer and water funds are about 2% and 12% within their budgets, so pretty consistent there. It's really the electric fund that's now showing purchase power costs overall that are about 11% below budget. So not really a huge amount, but again, it is surprising just with what we know is going on out in the energy market right now. So those lower purchase power costs in the electric fund are being offset by some higher operating expenses, which really is kind of a good thing. Last year with it being COVID, we weren't doing a whole lot. Our guys weren't out there doing a ton of stuff. We were a little bit conservative on our purchases for materials and things like that, and so we've really ramped things back up in all three funds, and I think that's part of the reason we're seeing these higher operating expenses so far this year. But really, we're getting stuff done, so that's definitely a good thing. Revenue-wise, in all three funds, we're extremely consistent with budget, which is a good sign. Last page on there is the year-to-date actual compared to the same month last year. We're actually seeing a reduction overall in net income. Again, like I said, operating revenues are up about 1%, but that increase in operating expenses this year is what's kind of driving that unfavorable variance this year, which is not necessarily a bad thing, I don't think. Just to summarize, it's really hard to predict what's going on with these anomalies in our purchase power. We hope to have some more answers here soon, especially as we try to budget for next year. We do find a lot of comfort, though, in Prairie State and the hedge that we're getting, the benefit that we're getting from that hedge right now. Other items are pretty normal. We've got the check register on there for November. I will point your attention down to page 25. The debt service coverage ratio for the water fund did dip below 2 this month. Again, we're required to meet a coverage ratio of 1.25 per our bond covenants. And so seeing that dip below 2, it's been right around 2 pretty much all year, so that's not really a huge deal, but something that we'll continue to monitor in that fund. I think that's all I've got. Does anybody have any questions on the financial report for November?
Yeah, that page 26, the dashboard, when you start looking at those percentages for our goals, evidently the numbers are pretty skewed for this month and through the end of the year, I would assume. Those percentages look like we've got all this reserved.
Specifically on cash or
Cash reserves,
yeah, definitely, and a lot of that too is we have been building cash a little bit in the electric fund since July. We kind of expected to spend a little bit more on the 161 project up to this point, and we haven't because of the delays that Ameren and just supply chain in general have thrown at us, and so we do have a little bit of excess cash in the electric fund, particular that we plan to spend here over this next year. As
when that contract goes out and we start spending money.
Right.
We're going to fix that in about 30 seconds here.
Yeah, great.
There you go. It takes me a while to catch up.
You're okay.
It's the Christmas tree picture, the red, the red and the green and the yellow.
Well, Paul, one more thing on that, page 5, the LMP averages, November isn't listed in there. It stops at October. Is that average LMP price for November somewhere else in the report?
No, I've got that, and I'll send that to you. It was my error.
It was about
My error.
$45. So I want to say right at about a 60-70% increase year over year, which brought that overall LMP average for the rolling 12 months up even more. I want to say $36 or $37. So kind of right in line with that overall increase that we're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
This is our MISO billing, and this shows 1 week from November 27th to December 3rd. And you can see there's one spike in here that's still hitting $300 per kilowatt. And so that's where, while we're befuddled a little bit because we're still having our Prairie State, which is our base load, absolutely solid. But then we've got our LMP. And I believe that because we've had our moderate weather and just haven't really maxed that out, I think there's a point where that's going to, if we have some significant cold and long duration cold hits, and start really using it, that we could see that really change. And if we look at the cost of what our LMP average is, it's just going straight up from what's been an average of 22 for years in the past. It's now up around that 40. And so we're twice 100% higher than what we are on that LMP. So we're nervous to see where that's going to go. And so, like we said, we've been really good. Prices have been good. Our revenues have actually been up. That's great. But our ability to predict that is a little rough right now.
So the concern is we get slammed in February again, like we did last year, that it could be
It could cost us again. Absolutely. So that's our concern. And I'm going to be talking tomorrow to the city council and the mayor with JR from the gas company, talking about what's gone on with the gas, and the gas prices have just been going up. Just recently, they've dropped down a little bit, but it's still, it has a direct effect on us and our prices.
Any further questions? Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I guess you're just staying right there, huh?
All right. Sticking with me, you've got before you there the final audit report for the Board of Public Works. From what the auditors presented last month as a draft to that report, there was absolutely zero change. So nothing really to report on there. Really just wanted to get it for you for your records, just so you had, and let you know that report there is ultimately rolled up into the consolidated City of Hannibal citywide audit report that was approved by council at their meeting on December 7th. So no need to approve. One thing I did want to point out real quick that I don't believe the auditors mentioned last month that I found very interesting myself was that we, for our loggers, so our pension plan loggers, we actually recognized a net pension asset on our balance sheet, which I actually had to create a whole new account for. So that tells me that's something that we've never had at the BPW. And so that's always been a net pension liability. And so essentially what that means is our loggers plan as the BPW has never been fully funded. I want to say that number has hovered around upper 80s, 90%. So essentially, if for whatever reason we had to pay all of our pension benefits right now, historically we would have had to have come up with that difference through cash reserves or some form of our own cash. However, because investment income was so strong this past year with our loggers fund, it made up for all of that difference and actually pushed us over 100% funded, which is it really goes as a testament to the folks down in Jeff City with loggers. They actually, I've got it right here, their investment return on a 1 year basis last year was 29.5%, which is absolutely incredible.
So it's funding those pension liabilities as part of our budget then. Do we budget for that difference?
We do.
So that we're not 5 years into this or 10 or whatever the number is. So is that what's happening?
Right. So we do have a contribution rate that's built in. That's kind of based on all that, which right now is 19.7%. And so that is an actuarial figured number that they give to us. And so we are still contributing, definitely. It's not like we can just stop everything that we're doing. It's just that based on the actuarial report, what we're contributing coupled with what we've gotten in investment income over the past year has basically fully funded that liability.
The question is, in the budget process, will we fully fund it in the future?
Well, I think there'll be more.
So just my experience, and Paul can correct me, if you look on page 18 to 21, that's where it's discussed here. And usually for it to actually have grown as it has, I've never seen that. And what I've seen in the past is that they will come back to you and say, in order for you to fully fund it, X amount needs to go from your organization to us. This is one of those rare ones where they might write back and say, all right, for this year, it's going to be this. And so usually we get told what that contribution needs to be. So, but we won't see that for a little bit. Usually it's around the the new year before we get that number, I believe. Paul, do we get an adjusted number kind of on an annual basis?
Yes.
A percentage? Yeah. And so we'll have to wait and see. We'll fully fund it, whatever that is. I believe we have always fully funded it.
Okay.
But again, this is for loggers. That's just for me, that's a fantastic number, great number for us. The other thing I will say is we've had the discussion where I wish we could use our reserve funds and actively manage it. And this is kind of an example of someone actively managing that money, which could really be a benefit to utilities across the state. So, yeah, we will take a look at that number, whatever we get from them, whatever they tell us, we will plug that into the budget. Right. Excuse me.
So functionally, this shows as an asset. I saw it like 23,000 or something like that, but does that actually come to us, or is that just hang out in our account with them?
Right, it's just hanging out there with them, and like I said, if they called the cows home and we had to give all that out right now, we just wouldn't have to dish out a whole bunch of reserve money to make up that difference.
This is
That's
a
all.
change in the reporting requirements of I think it's GASB 68. I couldn't quote you nothing, but this is, again, it's just a brand new way of doing it. Usually it's just a cost that we knew the cost. This was our pension cost. It was sent out and Paul would have it somewhere in an expense line. But now because of the GASB reporting requirements, they break it out and have to show it this way. It's still not the same numbers, but just a different way of reporting it.
It doesn't sound like to me that you're gonna make any major, budget change to that annual expenditure. It's just gonna be averaged into, next year it'll be different, the year after that it'll be different. We'll kind of keep pushing the same way
Exactly right.
and averaging for the last number of years.
6 months, 6 months into this fiscal year, the investment return isn't, definitely isn't quite near as good. So it could very well flip the exact opposite direction.
Might be good news. Yeah. But we won't bank on it till we see it.
So that's just for your records, no approval needed on that, but just wanted you to have that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Darren, you're up.
All right, if you want to look on your board packet, on page 39, we've got 3 items, all of them having to do with the Oakwood 161 kV substation. Each one of these have gone out for bid. We've pretty well discussed it. Matt did a great job of it. The first thing up is going to be the substation building, and that came in at $550,650. That is about 25% over what the original engineered estimated cost was, but I would recommend, and I ask for your approval, that we can go forward with this purchase. Now, if you want, I can do it one at a time, or we can go through all 3 of these.
Anybody have a preference? Go
James,
through
is there any way of doing that appropriately? Can we do that without stepping on anything?
I'm not aware of any law that would prevent you from taking them up all at once if that's what you want to do.
Awesome. Is that all right with you,
Yeah, that's
President?
great.
All right, let's
Yep.
go. Next one. So that is for the building. And if you go down to item number 40, you will see that we had only one bidder. And we recommend that you accept that one. Go to page 41. This is the mitigation design. And again, what this is we are paralleling a natural gas line. The natural gas company has said that's really not a good idea, at least be very careful with it. And so we are making sure that it is designed appropriately so they can accept it, we can do it. We had 3 different companies. There was CorePro, there was EN Engineering, and Meridian Pipeline Services. And we recommend, and so does the engineer recommend, that we go with the Meridian for $23,020. And then finally, we have the tree trimming. This is the removal of trees through the right-of-way, which we have gone and got. I shouldn't say we, really, Matt and Jared did a great job of getting these all done. And the cost for that is with Tom's Tree Service for $225,000. And if you see that, there's only one bidder at that one as well.
How many acres were on that?
Number of acres, Matt, was it 15, something like that, or I think it was, don't quote me, but I think it was roughly 15 acres.
Okay.
So that is my recommendation. My request of you is that you approve those 3 contracts, that you give me the authority to sign them and execute them.
Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve the 3 contracts.
Second.
Did I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Darren, you have approval to move forward with that
Thank you
project.
very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. Paul, you're back up.
You get a lot of me today, apologize.
You can get your own podium.
Well, it's that time of year again already. 5-year capital plan. I think, all of you went through this process last year, and I know, Melissa, you've been on the city council, so you're well aware of the process as well. But essentially, we are required to lay out a plan of our capital expenditures over the next 5 fiscal years. And once we do that internally, that plan will then go on to the Planning and Zoning Commission by January 31st, who will then compile all the different city entities and then present that as an overall plan at their meeting in March, which I believe is March 17th right now. And so, like we do every year, Matt, myself, Darren, we all met with the various supervisors that have responsibility for these acquisitions. And Alex was very involved in that as well. And we sat down and looked at last year's plan and added things, tweaked things, and basically just talked about what was needed and kind of how things worked financially. So you've got there in front of you the draft of this year's plan, which we won't ask for you to approve until next month. We wanted to give you a full month to be able to look at it. I kind of suggest that you, as you have time, you pull it up and you put it side by side with last year's plan to kind of see some of the changes. I'll touch on a few of the highlights here in just a second, but I did want to let you know that you've got a full month to kind of look at that as you have time. But what you'll see there on the very first page is a couple items in gray, and I believe there's 4 items, maybe 5 total that are in gray that Darren is going to touch on here in just a minute. Those are items of a little bit more importance. Think of it as an asterisk, if you will, with those items, but we'll talk about those in just a second. Page 3 is actually for the IT department, which we've never had a whole page dedicated to Mr. Matthew Jones, so he gets his own page this year. We felt that there was a need for that. There's some dollars that need to be spent on just hardening ourselves from a cybersecurity standpoint with everything that's happened here recently. And so you can see kind of the main thing there is a vulnerability assessment that will have a third party that'll come in, basically tell us where we're vulnerable, what we can do better, what we need to shore up, and those kinds of things. And so I think that's extremely important with the environment that we're in right now. Really, if we back up to the administration department, everything on there is going to be pretty well the same. We've got some additional dollars for the meter change out that are trickling into next fiscal year, and that's mainly a supply chain issue. We're still waiting on a few of those meters. Obviously, the electric department there on page 4, big ticket item, of course, is going to be the 161 project. Really the biggest change there, and we do have those numbers updated, is some of these higher bids that we've been seeing that Matt talked about. Those are reflected here. And so we have seen that project grow probably right around $1 million, maybe even a little more from where we're at right now. But like Matt said, we are over halfway out to bid, I believe, on all those line items. And we do expect to close on that financing in April, which will be perfect right before construction really gets going here next summer, next fall for that project. We do also hope to have funding left over from that financing for a rebuild of our Indian Mounds substation, which is project E13 on there. And so that is very much our intention. We'll just have to see where the numbers fall. And obviously the 161 project is much more of a priority, but there is a dire need for a replacement of the Indian Mountain substation as well that we hope to get done in the electric department. We've got Alex with us now, so really appreciate him and everything that he did looking into the water and sewer departments and kind of laying out what's a higher priority and what needs to kind of be shuffled. The unique thing with the water fund, as you guys know, is that it's very highly leveraged right now, and so we don't have, unfortunately, a ton of dollars to spend on projects, and so it really is focusing on what is the highest priority and what has to be done. And so for fiscal year 23, that is very much the gravity filter rehab, which is project W17. We've got $1 million in there for that. That could even be maybe a little conservative, and so that will be a very large project that we'll look at getting done next fiscal year. But in doing that, we obviously had to push some other projects back. The pre-sedimentation basin, as well as the primary clarifier scraper, are both projects that need to get done as well, but we've had to kind of shuffle those back just a little bit in order to move the gravity filters up. Similar situation, or not similar situation, but with the sewer fund, we do find that we have a little bit more cash available, and so we've kind of front-loaded some of these projects in next fiscal year, as well as some of the projects in this fiscal year. And one of the things that I want to commend with both Alex and Matt is they really put their heads together and said, you know, we can throw as many zeros as we want on a page, but we've really actually got to think about how that's going to look from a contractor and actually bidding the project out. And we found that we had some projects that were maybe 1 or 2 years away from each other that really could be bid together. It would make more sense and make it easier for a contractor to bid, not only bid on, but they'd also be here for a longer period of time. And so it would probably reduce the overall cost of the project. And so that's what you see with like project S6, the electrical upgrades, as well as project S11, the clarifier rehab. It just really made a whole lot more sense to bid those projects all together to save a little bit of time and money for the actual contractors that would be bidding. Another highlight on the sewer fund is project S8, which is some energy efficiency upgrades. I know they're going to be looking at putting in a new cooling tower there, as well as an in-plant water system, which will hopefully save on energy costs. And as we all know, some of the infrastructure on both the water and sewer side is very, very old. And so we do have a lot of rehab projects in there, new roofs, just new painting, all kinds of things that really, really need to be done. And that's kind of the focus of both of those funds. Last department would be the stormwater department. And as everybody knows, these projects won't happen until we have a funding source established. And so that is very much our intention. Once that funding source is established, we'll then kick off some of these hydraulic analysis study, and then obviously the utility establishment at that point. But those are the items we have right now. That list will be filled up very, very much more when we have an idea of our funding source.
So let me jump in here now and talk about those 4 gray areas that I've got put in there. We've got a couple of things that are just kind of floating out there that we're waiting on that are going to be very significant. Number 1 is a lead and copper rule. The federal government has come through and there's changing all of the requirements for the lead and copper rule. I want it stated for the public that currently we meet every single state and federal requirement for the lead and copper rule. And what happens is we're now looking at inside almost 99% of America, the actual water production and the water mains are not the source of lead or copper in the water. The 99% that it is in the home, it's in service lines, it's in those connections from the main to the meter, from the meter to the home, in the home, inside that plumbing. The federal government has said that they want to take that completely out. They're going to pay for, or at least they've got a plan to make sure that everything is out as quickly as possible. They want monies especially taken for underserved communities and underserved environmentally prejudiced areas, whatever that is defined as. They're also taking and looking at the action levels of those lead and copper going from 15 parts per billion to 10 parts per billion. All of this being said, when that lead and copper rule is approved by the EPA, and that was done on December 16th, it was actually passed the first round of voting. It now goes to public comment. There's about 80,000 comments on it right now. So there's legislation and legal stuff going on to see how it's going to shake out. Someday soon, as best I can tell you, we're going to have the responsibility of taking the lead out probably from the main at least to the property line. From what they have proposed, we're looking at having to do about 500 of those service lines a year. We estimate that we have about 5,000. Prior to that, we're going to have to do a study that counts all of it. Then we're going to have to do the work. In order for us to do 5,000 service lines in a year, we're estimating we're going to need probably 4 to 6 new employees, probably 2 to 3 crews, if that becomes our responsibility. So that's number one. This is again, one of those unknown areas that we don't have nailed down exactly. But if and when it comes, we're going to have to gear up. And with that, we're going to have, if we have 3 crews, we're going to have 3 trucks. We're going to have to probably have another vac truck. We're going to probably have to have a dump truck and probably an excavator to help us get this job done. Okay? So set that aside. Now we talk about the stormwater. We're going to have a stormwater utility. We're going to be going to the people for a vote probably, perhaps, November of 2022, perhaps April of 2023. We're going to let the city go through with their vote first and see how that goes. But when that happens, we now have a stormwater utility that we're going to need to fund and build. And again, to do it right, just to clean out all the existing stormwater that we have, and to be able to move that stuff out and to do the assessment required, that's probably going to take probably 4 employees and 2 trucks and perhaps another piece of equipment for a vac truck. And again, that Hancock law says if you pay for it with stormwater, you got to build it. So if you look at that, we have an additional number of employees. We're going to need to do something just for physically housing them, if that's what we're going to do. Now, again, this is the first shot to you to start thinking about. We have a study that talks about taking this building and expanding it, perhaps going and talking to someone, a neighbor, and getting more property, perhaps doing that. Perhaps we go somewhere else. Perhaps there's all kinds of those options. And I would give that to you as the board, that we can start thinking and having those discussions. What are we going to do as we continue, as we grow, and what's going to happen? So those other 4 items that we have in here, one is the cost of things down at the industrial park. There's also things that we're doing here in this building. We're looking at some of that money for improvement here is we would like to isolate. Right now, we've got work trucks, dump trucks, et cetera, that come out of this yard right around through our customer service parking area out to the industrial loop. And that's not a real good idea. So we've thought about, can we take that road and just come straight out to industrial loop, isolate us between the customers and at least some of our heavy equipment. It will not be 100%. We still have the bay door that we come and use. They come through that same thing, but it would at least minimize some of that. We've thought about, frankly, we need to upkeep this place a little bit. I'd love to repave the front, give it a little bit of make it look a little more professional, and put some money into it. However, I'm also very frugal. Sometimes people call that a cheapskate, but I'm frugal and don't want to spend money if we're going to do something else and we want to put it the right place. So I simply leave that in green. That is for a discussion. That's for thinking about. Those numbers that are in there are placeholders. They can definitely be pushed out by the years, but those are things, and we don't know yet. We do not know what's happening with the stormwater. We do not know what's happening with the lead and copper, but we need to be aware that that's going to create some significant changes for us. So that's my 2 cents that I wanted to share with you.
It really is long-term planning for the physical structures, for operations more than anything.
Absolutely.
Okay. Most of us knew this was coming, so. Anything else, Paul?
Nope, I think definitely if we did a budget workshop last year with the board. This is simply just the capital improvement plan. But if we wanted to take a closer look at any of these items ahead of that budget workshop that we'll probably do in March or sometime, we certainly can do so, or reach out to me with any questions you have, and we'll plan to discuss this more in more detail next month before we ask you to approve it.
Sounds good. Anything else, guys? Thank you, Paul.
And I'm going to ask Paul to stay right there because I'm going to let him handle this last item too, if that's all right.
That's fine, yeah.
He has responsibilities over the business office side.
So I apologize for not putting a memo together for you on this, but I guess I'll just give some of the background on it. Currently, the front office out there is open from 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 in the afternoon. The crew members, they work from 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. with half-hour lunches. And I forgot to mention the girls and Ryan up front, they have hour-long lunches. The crews are 7 to 3:30 with a half-hour lunch. The service person that's designated every day to go out and do disconnects and reconnects and things like that, he or she works 7:30 to 4 p.m. So what we're proposing is changing the office hours up front from that 7:30 to 4:30 to 7:30 to 4. And there's a few reasons for that. Definitely one being it would match up directly with that service person. And we do recognize that there has to be an additional time that we have people available after the crews leave to handle some of those reconnects and disconnects and those issues that the crews come across throughout their day. Two, frankly, an hour lunch is a long lunch sometimes. I mean, sometimes it is nice to have a full hour, but other times you tend to lose focus over that time. And so I think, I wouldn't say because I don't have any of the statistics, but I think there's more of a shift towards a half-hour lunch in a lot of industries overall. And obviously that's what the crews do as well as the service person already. And so that would allow the CSRs to do half-hour lunch as opposed to a full hour, which would allow them to remain a little more focused throughout their day. And again, we don't close at lunch, by the way. We stagger that to make sure we've always got staff available. And really, the only other thing is it would get the CSRs off earlier in the evening, which just makes it easier for things like daycare and school pickup and things like that, which we've had issues with over the past few years that I'm aware of. Obviously, there is an argument that you could say, reducing hours makes it less available for the customer to come in and make a payment. My office does sit right here overlooking the parking lot, and so I will say from time to time I glance up as people are coming in and out, and I've really made it a point as we've been discussing this over the past few months to kind of hone in on that 4 o'clock to 4:30 time frame. And I can say that surprisingly, actually, that there are very few customers during that time. And really the bulk of the customers that come in after 4 or even after 3:30, I would say, are actually using that kiosk out there. And they're not even coming through the door. So ultimately, what we're asking and proposing for you to make a motion and approve today is changing really that time that office is open from 7:30 to 4:30 to now 7:30 to 4 p.m. And happy to take any questions or discussion that you might have on that.
I'd simply add that we are trying to push people more and more to online. That's much less
I saw
labor
the Smart
intensive.
Hub numbers went way up.
Yeah.
I put together the numbers. January of 2020, before the pandemic, we had 2,348 customers that walked through that door and made a payment. Last month, and really over the last 6 months, that number's been around 700. So we've definitely seen a huge, about a 73% decrease since COVID in the amount of people that are walking through that door and making a payment, as opposed to people that are paying online or by other means.
I did see a marked increase in the Smart Hub transactions just in the last month or two. I can't remember the numbers, but it was up 20% in the last couple months. My only concern is the public perception of closing 4 versus 4:30. And I didn't actually realize that, we might get involved in this kind of stuff, but the only protection of, public perception is the only thing I really worry about. And you'd mentioned that you'd done a informal study looking up to see who is here from 4 to 4:30, and if you don't see hardly anybody, that's a good enough study for me.
And I should have also mentioned that this would take effect if it were approved February 1st. And so we would do bill stuffings for the entire month of January, as well as social media posts and things like that. And so if we got significant feedback that said this is absolutely not going to work, I would obviously, we'd have to reevaluate at that time as well.
Any further discussion? Does somebody want to make a motion?
Motion to adjust the office, public office hours schedule to 4 o'clock.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There you go, Paul.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Okay. James, any comments?
I have no comments.
Any general discussion? I may know where there's one leak.
Oh, really?
At the base of our bridge going across our driveway, and I remember this from when I was a kid, there's a spot in the hillside right where that 12-inch line comes through there that seeps out into the creek. I always thought it was a spring, but it's kind of a coincidence that there's a 12-inch main running right through there. I don't know if it's to give you something to target, but at any rate.
You know where that is? Thank you.
Put the GPS on that one.
And I'll tell you, and so I would, hopefully we've got some public there listening. If they see something like that, please let us know. We're interested in having any and all eyes. This is their water as well. So please, if you think of one, see one, please report it. We need that help.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to find out if there's any thermal imaging that's available through drones that'd be able to say, that shouldn't be that cold or hot or wet or whatever
Right.
color the image would show. Because it's going to seep into the ground in that area over time. That does.
We had somebody do a study in Southside that way.
Is it?
They did it with the fan mounted camera rather than a drone.
Was it thermal? I mean, I don't know
Yeah,
what
it
you
was
look
thermal.
for.
Any other further discussion? I'd take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas to everybody.
Merry Christmas to everybody, for sure.